global financial crisis and its long tail. We've been through Brexit, and the Right Honourable Member who spoke before me is quite right to emphasise the vast difference between our economy while we were in the European Union and now that we're not. And I welcome the work being done at Cabinet level and ask Cabinet to redouble their efforts to work on good trade arrangements under the EU-UK Security Pact to improve our economy and enlarge our economy. And of course, COVID. We heard of COVID this week with the report, and we all remember not just the impact on the economy, but the terrible impact, particularly on younger people, and the impact that long tail is having on so many of our young people who are still feeling too unwell to work, or whose work opportunities have been severely reduced through anxiety, depression and all the other things which not just COVID, but that context of fiscal austerity brought down upon them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a multi-faith, multi-ethnic constituency which works really hard on community cohesion. When all is said and done, we rub along well together in Hornsey and Fry and Barnet. From recent rhetoric, it could be assumed that there is deep unhappiness and division. In fact, I want to put on record the opposite. I would like to put on record the contribution to our local economy from all parts of my constituency, regardless of skin colour, faith or school qualifications. Of course, my community also faces challenges. We have unacceptably high numbers of children living in households where incomes don't cover the basics, heating, eating and rent. And I really welcome today's statement on heating, help for households, on eating, school meals, more breakfast clubs, and helping in particular secondary school children with their nutrition, and rent, quite rightly introducing a little more tax on some of the landlords who, in a wealthy place like London, will be making quite a lot and can afford to pay a little more. It's my first budget as a member of the Treasury Committee, and this budget has rewarded those who fought to restore hope, stop the chaos of the 14 years of Conservative governments and deliver change. Remember the election? We promised change. Today we saw change. That change is an end to poverty-line family budgets, and the hope is that we finally see food banks close for good.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and especially that she is a colleague with me on the Treasury Select Committee. In terms of the government delivering hope, a key part of the government's economic forecasting is, of course, the OBR. And what has driven a lot of what has driven the budget today is the 16 billion productivity downgrade by the OBR. We heard on the Treasury Select Committee that there was actually very little basis behind that productivity forecast in the first place, basically based on purely what the UK productivity was pre-2008, with not much depth beyond that. So does the honourable member agree with me that the OBR has serious work to do to look at the robustness of its forecasts?
I thank my colleague on the Treasury Select Committee for that, and I think there was quite a lot in today's budget on skills, on nutrition for children so that they can get their educational qualifications, and quite a lot that will help us to solve the productivity puzzle. But I do look forward to questioning with him the OBR on their data, how they got to that position, and how we can be helpful in pushing the government towards even more investment in skills, apprenticeships, and in deepening our investment in young people so that our productivity can improve over time. I know that so many of us here in the House are in politics because we want every child and every family to have the chance to thrive in school, in work, and in life. And let's look back at past Labor governments. In 1945, despair and hunger stalked many communities. London was flattened in the Blitz, and yet rationing would continue for 9 more years. Keynes famously said, anything we can actually do, we can afford. We are immeasurably richer than our predecessors. And then what did Labor do? Went on to build the NHS, built the country, built a welfare state. We can do this. We will make the UK fairer, and today is a really good start on that journey. Very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I know so many people wish to speak today, As a former borough leader, I introduced school meals for all primary school children. It was a great equaliser and social leveller. Children were more focused, made better progress. Families who were just about managing saved money, and there was no stigma. Everyone sat together and talked with each other. Free school meals for all primary schools were subsequently rolled out across London, and we know from today that more secondary school children will benefit under the government's proposals. We need to continue to restore hope and deliver change. The two-child cap on universal credit, of course, another pro-family measure, the most cost-effective, quick measure to bring up to 500,000 children out of poverty, and paid for by the most addictive forms of gambling, which has been increased. My personal view is we could have gone even further on the gambling, and I hope that it raises between 1 and 3 billion, because I think that the remote gambling in your bedroom on your phone is deeply damaging to society. The Trussell's September 2025 Hunger in the UK makes for sobering reading. In 2024, 16% of UK households were food insecure, which of course we know is not a food problem, it's an income problem. And this is an issue we must continue to interrogate. I'm very pleased to have secured a backbench debate on food inflation and poverty. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, together with school meals, more breakfast club provision, a higher living wage since the general election, slowly the living standards of families will turn around. It's particularly positive to see the first woman Chancellor recognise the impact which the difficult financial climate has had on families. I hope that by this time next year, once these measures are really embedded, we'll begin to see the closure of food banks. I've heard a lot about what we want to see by the end of this Parliament. Let's aim for a closure of food banks in this country by 2029. And we hope to feel that every child and every family will have the chance to thrive.
To help colleagues, they are now permitted to make an intervention, and a backbencher may wish to accept or decline that. And I call Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Budgets aren't easy for chancellors because there are so many things beyond your control, but being forced to make trade-offs reveals priorities. And I'm afraid today's priority was not economic growth, but political survival. That's because there was one central call the Chancellor had to make today. Do we reform welfare or do we raise tax? Getting our welfare bill down to pre-pandemic levels would save about £47 billion a year within 5 years. It wouldn't have been easy, but it would have meant no tax rises and plenty of headroom in public finances. Instead, welfare spend is going up and jobs and growth are going down. In every single day of the government's first year, around 2,200 people have been signed off, not just working, but even having to look for work. That's 1 million more people on universal credit just in the last year. Most of those claimants cite mental health, but every doctor I ever spoke to as Health Secretary said that people with anxiety and depression need social contact. That means being at work, not being at home. So this could, I would very happily give way to the Chair of the Select Committee.
On the point of mental health, he's absolutely right to point out that that is one of the drivers of people going on universal credit that does need tackling. So does he share my alarm that today in the HSJ it's been reported that this government's planning to water down the mental health investment standard, which starts to reverse the trend that we saw over many years of achieving parity of esteem between physical and mental health?
I absolutely share the honourable lady's concern about that. That was introduced when I was Health Secretary, and this could have been the budget in which the Chancellor announced that we will speed up treatment for people with mental illness and not park them on welfare. This could have been the budget that said that we will eliminate fraud by stopping completely benefit applications by phone. It could have been the budget that said that instead of relying on migration to help firms expand, we will make sure that people at home are fit to join the workforce. Instead, the welfare bill is going up by around £14 billion, not least because of the totally unfair abolition of the two-child cap, which I fear will see more children, not less, living in the structural poverty caused when there are no adults in the household at work. And I will happily give way to...
He surely, given his background, must recognise that there is a direct link between social policy and economic policy, that this country needs a working-age population to fund future pensions and welfare bills for generations in the future. How on earth can you do that if you're not encouraging children to be brought up and raised in a household that can afford to feed them?
Order. How on earth can you do that? We can't start off this 4 days of budget debate with the word you and your. So quickly come to your conclusion with the right language.
Well, I think she brought me to order just at the right time.
I recognise that the honourable gentleman's concern about child poverty is sincere. I just have a totally different view as to how to reduce child poverty in this country. I think financing people to have ever larger families means more children growing up in poverty, not less. And I think the evidence for that is that under the previous Conservative government, we had 1 million fewer children growing up in workless households, and child poverty in absolute terms fell. And he needs to look at that evidence. And the taxes and the price we are paying for this mushrooming welfare bill is that taxes are growing up and they are already starting to destroy growth. 180,000 fewer payroll jobs in the last year. Unemployment up, inflation up, interest rates higher than they would have been. And the tragedy is that absolute poverty, which, as I said, fell under the previous Conservative governments, is now likely to rise under Labour as jobs vanish and welfare rolls soar. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Tom Hayes.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way. I grew up in poverty. 1 in 4 children in Bournemouth, the town that I represent here, grow up in poverty. I can tell the honourable member, growing up in poverty is not a good thing. It's an awful thing for the life chances of the child. It's an awful thing for the family that care for them. It's an awful thing for the community that wraps their arms around the child. But would he agree with me too that he is ignoring the future costs of child poverty? I used to run mental health and domestic abuse services. I can certainly tell him that when children grow up in poverty and then in later life can't find the education, training and support that they need because of their trauma as a child, they cause extra costs for the public services that we then have to meet. Does he not agree with me that we should be preventing those future costs?
I absolutely agree with him, but I profoundly disagree on the way the government is choosing to do that, because by expanding the welfare bill, expanding the number of large families living in poverty, you are making the root causes of poverty worse and not better. And let me say this, the Chancellor says that there is a growth plan, but it was very difficult to discern anything at all in today's budget. We know, for example, that raising public sector productivity to private sector levels would add 0.4% to annual GDP growth. We know that proper planning reforms would add 0.4%. We know that proper welfare reform would add 0.3%. We know that getting energy bills down properly adds 0.3%. We know that AI could dwarf all of that, according to Microsoft and Accenture, potentially adding 1% a year. But we got none of that today. Instead, we had a government arriving in office saying they wanted growth, 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 without knowing how they're going to get there. And growth needs a plan, not a soundbite. And it's that lack of a plan, or even a guiding philosophy, which is why today we've ended up with a budget that damages growth, damages investment, damages jobs, and most tragically of all, damages opportunities for young people, of whom there will shortly be 1 million not in employment, education or training. I give way to the honourable member.
Respected member of the House, but I think it's really important that we reflect on the facts. The Chancellor announced today, as did the OBR, that growth is up from 1% to 1.5% this year, and he talks about having a plan on planning reform, a subject I'm very interested in. Why then did his party abstain and not back our planning reforms?
I think he's absolutely right. We should look at the facts, and the facts are very clear that the OBR upgraded growth for this year, and then they downgraded it for every single year of the forecast thereafter. And that is why the overall size of the economy is shrinking as a result of the measures taken by the Chancellor in the last budget, and I'm afraid made much worse in this budget. And I agree with him that we do need to go further on planning reform, but I don't think we have any plan for the government for the really substantive changes that would align incentives between local communities and national government when it gets to, for example, planning approval for big infrastructure projects. And I would cheer from the rafters if we heard that from the Chancellor, because it is urgently needed. And please, this is something which I think is most disappointing of all. Please, can the government not tell us that everything is just going to be fine because they're not the evil Tories? Those terrible Tories got inflation down. They got inflation down from 11% to 2%. They saw 4 million new jobs in the economy, 4 million new jobs as opposed to nearly 200,000 fewer. They grew the economy faster than France, Germany, Italy or Japan, and they attracted more foreign greenfield direct investment than anywhere in the world apart from China and the United States. I give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Could he remind us which government led to 11% inflation? Could he remind us which government crashed the economy? And could he also speak to the 1,970 children estimated in Morecambe and Loonsdale who will benefit from the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, and tell them why they should continue to live in poverty?
Interventions must be short and to the point, and an actual question or a statement. So, Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to tell her which government was responsible for 11% inflation. The Russian government was responsible for 11% inflation, and I will happily look in the eye the 200,000 fewer children in absolute poverty after a succession of Conservative governments because of those 4 million jobs created on our watch. And let me say this, these dreadful Tories increased the number of doctors and nurses in the NHS by a third. Those posh Tories increased standards in state schools to have the highest reading standards in the Western world. And that is because, Madam Deputy Speaker, progressive instincts don't pay the bill for good public services. A strong economy does. And I will give way to my
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. During that period, can you remind the House what happened to the deficit, which was inherited at over 10%? And maybe we'll just deal with that.
Well, absolutely right, because the Chancellor makes a great play of fiscal responsibility. Incidentally, I hope she will correct the record when she said that she was reducing debt, when the OBR's Economic and Financial Outlook says that it's going up from 95% of GDP to 96% of GDP. But yes, when the previous Conservative government came to office, the government was borrowing nearly £1 in every 4 that it was spending on public services. We reduced that deficit from 10% to 2%, and the party opposite opposed us every single step of the way. I will give way one last time to my right honourable friend.
Well, I thank him for giving me. I couldn't resist, as we're going down memory lane, to remind him when we came to power in 2010, we had a youth unemployment crisis. Youth unemployment plunged when we were in office. Now Labour are back in office. They've imposed the national insurance contribution tax. Youth unemployment is soaring again. Is that not a damning indictment of the party office?
And they might find that difficult to hear from a former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister, but they might want to listen to the Resolution Foundation, which has been saying exactly the same thing on the airways today. It has been, and no one disputes the progressive credentials of the Resolution Foundation, but they have been warning against this rise in the minimum wage and all the extra workers' rights because they say it will lead to a crisis, or it could lead to a crisis in youth unemployment. I don't want to leave the honourable lady out, but I promise that'll be my last intervention.
I thank him very much for giving way. Is the right honourable gentleman proud, and does he find it fiscally responsible that he, in his 2 budgets, left us with the lowest amount of fiscal headroom since the OBR was created at 8.9 billion in 2024, leaving the current Chancellor and the present Labour government a mountain to climb in order to get us back to 22 billion of solid headroom?
I am proud that I dealt with a real black hole of 72 billion, not a fake one of 22 billion in my fiscal events, that I met the fiscal rules every time. And if she's really concerned about that low headroom, why did the Shadow Chancellor at the time, and now the current Chancellor, not object once to the fact that headroom was reduced to that level. I'll tell you why she didn't object. Because if I had left headroom any higher, I would have had to cut spending more or increase taxes higher, and that would have made the recession that we were heading into deeper and worse, with more unemployment, fewer jobs and more poverty. And that's why I'm proud that I took the right decision. But I want to finish with this, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, because even now, it may not be too late. A government that tries to do the right thing with the time that it has left is more likely to earn the trust of the British people than one that has given up. Please do not treat government as an exercise in survival. That would be a betrayal. That would be a betrayal of the government's mandate. People with the broadest shoulders, as the Chancellor described them, will be rightly angry today. But people who depend on public services, people looking for a job, people on the poverty line, they are the ones who need a strong economy more than anyone else. And they will finish today feeling more scared than ever about their prospects.
Avina Apongasari.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Chancellor's budget and its message of strong foundations and secure future. It delivers on the priorities that matter most to my constituency of Erith and Thamesmead: economic growth, lower cost of living, investment in families and a stronger NHS. I also fully welcome the Chancellor's commitment of the DLR extension to Thamesmead, which is on page 65 of the budget. In a moment. It's a game-changing moment for residents who have waited decades for proper transport links. I give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my constituency neighbour for giving way. Page 104 of the budget book confirms that capital investment to fix more potholes for the Lower Thames crossing to the east of my constituency and for the DLR to Thamesmead to the west of my constituency. So will she welcome me in for thanking the Chancellor for that support, for that capital investment locally for our constituencies?
Thank my honourable friend Betsy in Crayford. We share a similar council, Betsy Council, and I know how important it is to have those potholes. And I also want to thank him for supporting the DLR to Thamesmead. This project unlocks 25,000 to 30,000 homes, and also around 10,000 new jobs, about 11.6 billion economic impact estimated by TfL, as well as a crowd in nearly 18 billion of private investment over 30 years. Transformation of one of London's most underserved communities, and cut commutes by nearly half, benefiting over 500,000 people that live in the area and wider London. This is not just a transport upgrade, it is key to unlocking opportunity and prosperity for generations. It's been a community-led campaign which has had cross-community effort, and I'm proud of the role that my residents have played in getting us here. It has also been a personal priority since I was first elected in December 2019, which I referenced in my maiden speech on the opposite side. And it was also part of my 2019 general election pledge. Peter, my resident, told me last week that he has lived in Thamesmead for over 45 years with promise after promise of a transport hub to London's only postcode without a tube and train station. He and I know that so many thousands more are going to be thrilled that this Labour government is putting investment behind their community so they can thrive. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to pay tribute to the key supporters whose work have been vital. My Greenwich Council leader, Anthony Correa, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, my honourable friends for West Ham and Beckton, my Thamesmead councillors, plus TfL, councils, assembly members, and members in this place, developers Peabody and Lendlease, and of course my senior parliamentary researcher, Patrick Brown. But most of all, local people and their brilliant campaigning. They never lost faith in this project. This is a collective achievement, and this constituency should be proud of the role it has had towards this budget. I also welcome the Labour government's announcement in September that Thamesmead is one of the 12 areas selected by the New Towns Task Force, further proof of the area's potential and importance. So once the DLR is secured, schools, NHS services, jobs and communities and facilities must grow alongside new homes. This is a start of a new chapter in Thamesmead, and I'm proud to have played a part, and I'm proud of my community who have championed this project from the start. I also strongly support the Chancellor's mission to reduce child poverty, including the nationwide rollout of free school breakfast clubs. I've seen firsthand the benefits in my constituency of Willowbank and Jubilee Primary School, better start for pupils and a real financial relief for families and schools. So I was delighted to see in page 31 of the budget that from September 2026, there'll be about 12,000 more primary schools which will offer free breakfast clubs, helping 200,000 more children. And I believe that saves working families around 450 a year and ensures over 500,000 more children do not start their school day hungry. I also welcome the confirmation of further investment to cut NHS waiting times, a vital issue for my constituents. And also welcome that today's announcements of the 250 new neighbourhood health, the one-stop shops, bringing together GPs, nurses, dentists and pharmacists under one roof, starting in areas that need it the most. Madam Deputy Speaker, would you like to give way?
I'm extremely grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. On health facilities, would you share my concern that the only thing with more leaks than the budget run-up period is the roof of Musgrave Park Hospital in my Taunton constituency? And does she agree, would she agree that those hospitals in the second wave and third wave programme for rebuild need interim funding to keep them going in the meantime across the country, including in Taunton Wellington?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I have to remind him that this government is delivering more than previous governments. You may remember that his party was previously in coalition with the previous government that caused a lot of damage to this country. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to conclude by saying this budget delivers for the country, and it delivers for my constituency of Erith and Thamesmead. So after decades of waiting, residents will finally have their transport links they deserve and the opportunities that will come with them. And a new chapter begins today. And I will continue to fight for the investment, services and opportunity for my community because they deserve it.
Order of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
The benefit bill is now unsustainable in this country. And really the main purpose of what I want to say today is that I hope that we could try and create some sort of consensus in the House to try and deal with this problem, which is imposing a massive level of debt on families. Now, I'm absolutely sure that the government accepts that this burden is unsustainable. And I'm absolutely certain that if they would come to the House with sensible proposals to try and get people off benefit, Her Majesty's loyal opposition would support the government in that endeavour. The government ducked the challenge early in the year to cut benefits and to try and thereby encourage more people into work. We said at the time that we were prepared to support the government to try and deliver these cuts. And I'm sure that the opposition front bench would repeat that promise. Naturally, yeah.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I just want to clarify that he's perfectly happy for children to continue to live in child poverty while we try to reform the welfare benefit system. Is that right?
Actually making that point, because what we were discussing earlier in the year were people who were seeking work, and we were trying to encourage people to get back into work. I think the problem that I can understand the political imperative of what the Chancellor has done today to sustain her own position with her own backbenchers. But the problem is that you're going to create a perverse incentive for people on benefit with larger families to stay out of work. And I'm not sure that's good for their morale, good for the economy, good for anybody. So I think it seems a very easy hit for the Chancellor today but I think there are going to be perverse results. I just want to also say a word about representing a rural constituency of the family farm tax. The budget's extension of inheritance tax to businesses assets over 1 million has imposed, as we know, a major new burden on long-established family farms in my constituency and elsewhere. Now, I could quite understand if the government was seeking to target larger estates, target people who were acquiring estates to avoid inheritance tax. But this new family farm tax affects not just large landed estates, but ordinary farms worked by generations of the same families. And I was actually visiting quite recently a tenant farmer in my own constituency. And this actually affects him because his tenancy, he doesn't own the land, it's only a tenancy, but the tenancy is a capital asset and he will be taxed on it, maybe as much as £300,000, which affects the ability of the family to stay in farming. Many family farmers, as we know, lack liquid assets. They're forcing them to hold cash back, restructure, borrow, or consider selling part of the business. Because the dividends used to pay inheritance tax are themselves taxed, these firms, family farms, face an effective tax rate of about 33%. Now, the measure affects a significant share of medium-sized, long-standing firms, even though it raises less than £500 million annually. This achieves maximum social and economic destruction for minimal financial reward. The policy discourages business growth because expanding a family firm increases future tax liabilities on heirs. Now, some advisors are recommending owners sell businesses outright to avoid in future tax complications. A climate of unpredictable tax changes creates fear amongst owners and undermines long-term planning. The uncertainty over succession planning is freezing investment and expansion across affected businesses. So the arguments can be repeated, but I do appeal to the government to try and listen to the National Farmers Union, which has come up with some very sensible compromises, which would keep family farms in business and would achieve the government's objective. Let me say a bit about the benefits bill. 4 million universal credit claimants are now excused from even looking for a job. 4 million, I repeat, universal credit claimants are now excused from even looking for a job. This is a disaster in terms of self-reliance, in terms of the economy, and much else. Now, numbers we know have grown sharply since the pandemic. A surge in reported illnesses, particularly mental health conditions, is the main driver. 2/3 of recent work capability assessments cite mental or behavioural disorders. My right honourable friend, the member for Chingford, has blamed the collapse in the assessment process for the rise in successful claims. Remote and paper-based assessments introduced during COVID have weakened checks on eligibility. This again is something that we could cooperate across the House. It's not just a question of cutting benefits, it's also a question of summoning people in, helping them, giving them confidence to try and get back into the workplace. And unless we do that, and also tackle perverse incentives in the whole benefit system, which discourage people from working, then we are going to fail as a nation. Yes.
Grateful, because I like drilling into the data and getting into the facts. And if you see the correlation between the rise in people who are claiming social security and the rise in waiting lists in the NHS, they map identically through all parliaments, Tory and Labour, and therefore really look at the data before making assumptions, and getting the waiting list down has got to be our objective.
Order. The member used the term "you" twice. Maybe focusing and looking at the chair will stop colleagues referring to language "you" twice. So everybody.
I'm very careful actually to look at the data and constantly refer to facts which are accepted by the OBR and by the government. These facts are not challenged. That 300,000 people are currently waiting to undergo a work capability assessment. We need emergency measures to clear this backlog. The lack of in-person assessments, and I'm surprised that anybody could disagree with what I'm saying, has created a feedback loop where dependency grows and work expectations diminish. The longer this is allowed to continue, the harder it becomes for people to reintegrate into society. This is a system that writes people off rather than helping them back into employment. And I would have thought we could all agree on that. We must not abandon these people. This is about human dignity. Getting people off long-term benefits and into employment brings significant mental health benefits. It also helps our straitened finances. The cost of sickness and disability benefits is projected to reach £100 billion annually by the end of the decade. Now, some households receive more than £30,000 a year in universal credit alone, with disability benefits payments pushing support well above that. The current system is financially incentivized individuals to demonstrate incapacity rather than engage with work. The government has redeployed, I agree, work coaches to re-engage long-term inactive claimants, but systematic incentives remain unchanged. Failure to tackle long-term benefit dependency impoverishes the nation by increasing fiscal burdens and reducing labour force participation. Now, the Office for Budget Responsibility reports the working age incapacity benefit caseload reached 7% in 2023-24 and is forecast to hit 7.9% by 2028-29. We must stop paying full benefits to young people who are neither working nor studying. These young people should be working or studying. I'll make some progress, if I may. The Centre for Policy Social Justice estimates that by 2026, there will be a gap of over £2,500 between earnings and combined benefit income for under 25s. So I could go on making these arguments, but I'll just proceed to the next part of my speech on immigration. I accept that the greatest failure of our last government was immigration. The 21 to 2024 Boris wave, and I admit it, and I apologise on behalf of my government, allowed, I don't know why shouldn't I apologise? Why shouldn't I be honest? Allowed well over 4 million non-UK migrants into the country. Many of these will soon qualify for indefinite leave to remain. ILR grants access to benefits and public services on the same basis as citizens is destroying financial incentives. The scale of this is financially significant. Now, the Home Secretary, I agree, has announced some sensible moves, and I supported her when she came to the House. For example, extending the standard qualifying period for ILR from 5 years to 10 years. As Carl Williams of the Centre for Policy Studies notes, policymakers cannot say with confidence how many migrants currently hold ILR or their economic circumstances. Experimental DWP data shows around 211,000 ILR holders receive universal credit. This is completely unsustainable. If Migration Observatory estimates are correct, between 27% and 37% of ILR holders receive universal credit. So this is a worrying problem and needs resolution. Next, increasing tax. I've long argued for a much simpler tax system, close loopholes but keep taxes low, especially for married families. Corporate tax complexity creates an inherent bias towards huge multinationals. They can hire departments of accountants to reduce their liabilities. A free market relies on everyone paying their fair share. We need creative ways of ensuring companies like Amazon and Starbucks can operate freely, we all use them, while paying a fair contribution. Then we can help lighten the burden on family farms, working people and small firms. Increasing taxes on working people risks undermining growth by reducing take-home pay and incentives. ONS figures show direct taxes reduced income inequality by only 4.4 percentage points, limited redistribution for a heavy burden. Higher taxes on the wealthy simply encourage them to leave. Data from the Henley and Partners 2025 migration report suggests the UK may lose 16,500 millionaires this year. What's the point of it? Why are we driving these wealth creators out of the country? So I'll just finish with your. There's so much to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I know that I'll weary the House if I go on too long. Can I just end by one point? It's quite controversial and it's quite difficult to say this. The triple lock, and I know I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but I've got to say the truth as I believe it. We all know that the triple lock is unsustainable. It is. You cannot have a situation where people of my generation are consuming an ever greater proportion of national wealth through the state pension. Frankly, our government never dared tackle it, having it brought it in because they knew that the Labour Party would crucify them in the ballot box. Now the Labour Party is caught in the same bind. The fact is, it is completely unfair on younger people if the burden of older people through the triple lock increases year by year. We laugh at the French because of their failure to actually achieve sensible pension reform. But we ourselves have got to have the courage, frankly, to end the triple lock. And I think this will only be done with consensus between the two parties. And I'm absolutely sure that if the government was to come to the lead of the opposition and say that this is unsustainable and will you share this burden with you, which may seem to be very unpopular, but actually, no, many older people of my generation, we all have children, we all have grandchildren, we all see our own children struggling to get on the housing market. So many, I think that actually if government and opposition were prepared to have the courage to deal with the triple lock, I'm not sure it would be as unpopular with older people as is sometimes maintained. And after all, we could always relieve the burden on those on pension credit. We could find ways of helping people who really couldn't afford to live. But the triple lock must go. It's not a popular policy, but I think in our hearts, we know it's the right policy.
We have shy of 60 members trying to contribute, so there was a speaking limit of 10 minutes to begin with. Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Father of the House in his wide-ranging contribution. I think he's perhaps slightly more optimistic about the ability to achieve consensus across the front benches than sadly I might be, but I think his point about intergenerational unfairness is absolutely right. Let me start by recognising the hard work of the Treasury team and the work they've put in to this budget against what I think is a very challenging international backdrop, particularly around trade issues. And can I particularly welcome what I think is the long overdue measures on council tax for more valuable properties. Of course, no one wants to pay more tax, of course, but there are some of us who appreciate that public services and the public realm need to be properly funded. Frankly, what is extraordinary to me is a number of years that those invaluable properties have escaped proper taxation. And I'm old enough to remember how this all came about, the council tax being introduced as a quick fix after the debacle of the Tory poll tax. Frankly, I'm afraid some people on the opposition benches never change. They're always hankering to find a way to escape paying their dues. They hanker after things like flat taxes or whatever. But after 30 years of not making their contribution, I'm absolutely delighted that it's this government that's finally cracking down on this unfairness. And there are many other aspects to this budget that I strongly welcome. Many of my Cambridge constituents commute into London, and the freeze on regulated rail fares, including season tickets, will be widely welcome. But I also wish to say a few things about what the money raised in the budget is spent on. Because in my experience, both as an MP and a former minister, is it wasn't just the council tax system that the Tories broke in the 1990s, it went much wider. The fragmentation and privatisation of so much of our public realm has turned out, in my view, not only to cost us financially, but contributes to the gloom that has descended on what is still a rich and successful country. Private affluence alongside public decay does not make for a happy society. And in the limited time I have, I've cite a few examples I've come across over the previous few weeks. The chaos in our prison and justice systems goes back in no small part to the disastrous policies pursued by Chris Grayling in his misguided attempts to privatise the probation service, from which, in my view, it has never fully recovered. And the fragmentation of services was made particularly clear to me recently when residents in a very modern development near Cambridge railway station complained to me about the problems they were facing with both criminal behaviour and poor building standards. Now, the housing associations turned out in force to meet me. It's amazing what a visit from the MP will do. And they told me about the labyrinth of organisations involved in these issues, at least 2 councils, the police, those responsible for developing the building, those responsible separately for maintaining the building, those responsible for fire safety. How could anyone come to a sensible solution with all that? I came away very clear on one thing. No one seemed to take responsibility overall, and as a consequence, the residents have got a very poor deal. And another example, the rightful national outcry over the abuse of too many neighbourhood shops selling vapes and smuggled cigarettes, exposed so well by BBC investigative reporters. And I can't be the only one who wondered why it seems so hard to enforce the law when it's being flouted in plain sight. So I asked the House of Commons Library for some statistics on what's happened to trading standards officers over the years. And guess what? In 2010, local authorities spent just under £172 million per annum. By 2020, that had fallen to just over 103 million and only recovered a little to 117 million by 2024. Now, they're not the only agencies involved, I understand that, but no wonder they struggle to respond. And it's certainly not a criticism of trading standards officers. They do a remarkable job, given how they've been starved of resources. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, my conclusion is that this budget is a really good start in difficult circumstances, but that we've got a huge way to go in rebuilding the public realm so that we have a country which feels safe and secure for everyone. Putting back together what has been broken apart is not easy nor quick. It's much easier to break things than to put them back together again. We've had decades of disruption from the party opposite, but frankly would only be made worse by the party that goes by the name Reform. But they too ought to go to trading standards because it's a false prospectus. They're not about reforming the country, they're about breaking it. I'm confident that people will increasingly recognise that. So I urge my Treasury colleagues to stand firm, rebuild not just our economy, but the communities in which we all live, whatever our circumstances.
Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I begin by referring members to my register of members' interests, including my position as chair of the APPG for the UAE. Madam Deputy Speaker, it didn't have to be this way. The roots of this budget and its failure began with the last one. It began with the unnecessary delay and scaremongering before that budget, which in turn frightened consumers and scared businesses off of investment. And then in turn, when the budget was announced, the Chancellor made 3 key errors. The first thing she did was to choose to tax probably the worst thing in terms of jobs and growth by putting up national insurance contributions. She chose to drive human capital and financial capital away from the United Kingdom with the abolition of the non-dom tax status, and she chose a totally unrealistically low level of fiscal headroom, which meant that by the time the Chancellor sat down, markets were already preparing for the next round of tax rises, and this sense only grew with the U-turn on welfare reforms. And the problem is, the government is making exactly the same mistake all over again, with the litany of leaks culminating in the extraordinary position of the OBR publishing the entire content of the Chancellor's budget before she even stood up, rendering the entire speech meaningless. And now, in turn, this budget demonstrates a simple and clear choice: higher welfare paid for by higher taxes. And for my constituents, that means higher income tax, it means higher taxes on their savings, it means higher taxes on their dividends, and in a constituency like mine, which has seen house prices soar over the past 30-odd years, now to astronomical levels, there is a real risk that older people in their family homes that they bought at very low prices are now going to have, by skimping and scraping to do so, I should say, are now going to have to find several £1,000s every year just to stay in their family home that they so love. And I think that is a real problem that is going to emerge from this budget. And I would urge the Chancellor to look at the very least at ameliorating measures to stop older people having to sell their homes in order to pay their council tax bills. But beyond this, there lies this strategic choice. And we all know exactly what has happened. The Labour leadership has watched in fear as its vote hemorrhages to the left. This budget is all about shoring up Labour's tax base. The residents of Bushey, the residents of Radlett, the residents of Potters Bar, the residents of Boreham Wood, their taxes are being hiked to pay for higher welfare to appease Labour's backbenchers. I'll happily give way.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Would he not accept that in addition to the taxpayers that he's talking about in those communities, which I've visited and know in Bushey and Boreham Wood and other parts of Hertsmere constituency, there will be families who, amongst his own constituents, who have more than one child and receive benefit, more than two children and receive benefits, who will be positively impacted by today's budget, and he could at least nod in the direction of those of his constituents who will benefit from the measures that the Chancellor has set out.
I think that the problem with that analysis is that many people on the same street will think to themselves, I chose not to have another child because I couldn't afford to do so, and yet now my neighbour is able to have more children paid for by the taxman through welfare. And that is the fundamental unfairness at the heart of this budget announcement. But worse than that, I will give away in a moment, but worse than that, this failure to grasp welfare reform risks neglecting a whole generation. We already see young workers' prospects under threat from AI. We see the prospects of employment being hit by Labour's jobs tax and the labour market regulation, which is discouraging hiring. And now the message seems to emerge from the government, don't worry, abandon ambition, there's ever higher welfare under Labour, that's the reason why you should vote for us. I will happily give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend who's making a characteristically excellent speech. Would he agree with me that we are at the tipping point where the welfare state is ceasing to be what we've always wanted it to be, which is a safety net below which nobody can fall, but instead is becoming a cocoon which is going to trap a whole generation in dependency and absolutely kill off aspiration and social mobility?
As ever, my honourable friend is totally correct. Of course, the welfare state should be there for those people in temporary difficulty, but it cannot be a lifestyle, which is what ends up happening. I will give way to the chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, then I must make some progress. So
I do thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Look, we've had evidence at the committee. It is absolutely a fallacy which we need to nail, that people choose to have more children to get more benefits. That is not the case. People fall on hard times. That safety net is there, and the ambition of my young families in Hackney is immense, but they are held back. There are a lot more systemic issues about poverty, but this will tackle it for that generation, and we need to welcome it.
Well, of course, there will be the occasional person that falls on hard times, but I think she should try saying that to many, many of my constituents who are unable to have more children. They take the choice not to have it, and that option is now, there's an imbalance between that and the approach taken on welfare. And so we have a situation where at the same time as the United Kingdom is embracing higher taxes and an ever greater role for the state, beyond Europe, lower tax dynamism abounds. We can see the US surging with freer markets and a tech and energy bonanza. You only need to look to the Gulf, to states like UAE and Saudi Arabia that are embracing tech, finance, and alternative energy. Now, a generation ago, this would have mattered less. But now we're in the position where Labour and capital are highly mobile, and we are seeing more and more people voting with their feet, leaving the United Kingdom by the tens of thousands. And this tide is washing out our very brightest and best away from our shores, and I fear that once those people leave, it is very hard to get them to come back. And the sadness of all of this is that the United Kingdom remains a wonderful country. It is actually a beacon of stability with the rule of law, the English language, the time zone, great research universities, and a highly talented workforce. And indeed, having criticised the government a lot, I pay tribute to them for successfully concluding a number of free trade agreements, including with India and the United States. And I hope that others will follow, including with the GCC. So at a time when other countries present challenges, whether it's the security situation in relation to China, whether it's the unpredictability of the United States or stagnation in Europe, the United Kingdom actually has a golden opportunity to be a magnet for investment from businesses and entrepreneurs around the world. But the risk is that we are consigning ourselves to a situation which a Scottish entrepreneur described to me a couple of days ago as being the why bother economy. And what he meant by that was that, of course, people aren't going to disinvest, but they won't choose to actively invest in the United Kingdom because we are not creating the environment where we are rewarding risk-taking and entrepreneurship. So if we are to seize this moment, there are a few simple steps that we could take, and I would urge the Chancellor to do so in order to light the fire of competitiveness. First of all, instead of trying to drive away the wealthiest and biggest global investors, as we have done with the abolition of the non-dom status, we should be welcoming them and gaining more revenue at the same time. One only needs to look at the Italian model, where they have imposed a relatively high fee, but in return to that have exempted wealthy mobile people from paying further taxation. As a result of that, investment in Italy is surging, and the number of wealthy people choosing to locate in Italy is surging, with all the opportunities that brings for growth and investment. Instead of obsessing with policing social media, we should be aggressively policing the sort of small, low-level crime that drives people away from locating in this country, whether it's the phone snatching, the shoplifting, or the general sense that the streets of this country have become less safe than they were a few years ago. And instead of clobbering entrepreneurs, wealth creators, and hardworking Brits with ever higher marginal rates, we should have the confidence to believe that lower marginal rates generate higher revenues in the long run and benefit absolutely everyone. And most importantly of all, in relation to this budget, instead of consigning a generation to welfare, we should be aggressively reforming the welfare state to create opportunities for all. It really isn't too late for the government to seize this opportunity. But sadly, I fear that only a change of government, and of course a change of government to the Conservative Party, will be able to deliver those things.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I don't know what budget the right honourable gentleman was reading, but it wasn't the budget that was put on the table this afternoon. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Chancellor got the judgment exactly right today. She had a difficult inheritance, she had a difficult hand, she had difficult decisions to take, and she got the calls absolutely right. We have a situation now, the budget now being delivered, where we have growth this year that has been forecast to rise. We have business investment over the course of this Parliament, which is forecast to rise. We have inflation, which is coming down. We have forecast interest rates, which are coming down. We have energy bills for our constituents, which are coming down. Yeah. And we have child poverty, which is actually set to collapse. That is 8,900 people in my constituency who will be better off because of this budget, a Labour budget, which is delivered by a Labour Chancellor this afternoon. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you know, I've been in this House for 21 years. I have sat on both front benches. I have sat on both sets of back benches. And so I've come to see over the years the selective amnesia which somehow bedevils debate in this place, and the problem of unreliable narrators. But I have to say, I have never seen amnesia on as epic a scale as I heard from the Leader of the Opposition today. Now, I think it is quite well established, Madam Deputy Speaker, that back in 2010, I thought the numbers were a little bit tight. I thought difficult decisions were going to be needed, which is why we left a judiciously balanced budget
2/3 spending cuts, 1/3 tax rises that would have halved the deficit in 4 years and brought debt borrowing down by 2016. That, of course, was not the strategy that was pursued by the last government. And what is the difference that that made? Well, the party opposite saddled this country with an extraordinary £1 trillion of debt higher than the situation that we left with. That's why we're paying £1.10 in interest rates today, because they more than doubled the national debt. And before we hear any nonsense about COVID, let us just remember that 80 to 90% of the increase in debt that the Conservative saddled us with was before the COVID lockdowns began. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Oh, nothing as contemporary as COVID. Don't worry about that. I just wondered how much money he left in the coffers when he was Chief Secretary in 1997.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know what his faculty of maths is like. I don't know if he realises that a trillion has 12 noughts. But we left the national debt £1 trillion lower than it is today. £2.7 trillion. That is how much this country is now borrowing. Now, the great tragedy, of course, of all of this is that if they'd borrowed money at low interest costs and actually invested it in something that enhanced productivity, we would be in a better position today. The Chancellor wouldn't have had to deliver the budget that she had to deliver today. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Look at the International Monetary Fund. 25th of July, the report is very clear. The fact is that our productivity growth under the party opposite collapsed by a third compared to the good old New Labour years. Our productivity divergence now with the United States is so serious. Our productivity growth has been half what it has been in the United States. And the OBR is really clear today. The downgrade on growth that they have baked into their numbers is entirely because of the productivity collapse, because they wasted the money during their 14 years in office. And of course, I should just say, by the by, because Conservatives are Conservatives, they managed to put £1 trillion on the debt, they managed to collapse the productivity numbers, and they still managed to put inequality up through the roof. That is why we all had in our constituencies food bank queues that we will never forget. I will never forget, for as long as I live, the phenomenon of collecting food in inner city Birmingham because our food banks had run out of food. I will never forget the children at Adderley School who were literally helping restock our food banks by taking penguin bars out of their lunch boxes to put them in food collection crates so that their classmates didn't go hungry at lunchtime. That's the reality of the child poverty legacy that this party left us with, and that is the legacy that the Chancellor got to grips with today. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we look forward on our committee to scrutinising the proposals that have been laid out today. We have been travelling the country over the last couple of weeks, talking to business about what they wanted out of this budget. And there were three things that were very clear. What is extraordinary about this country? These are aisles of wonder. We now stand on the threshold of an extraordinary new era of innovation. This is an extraordinary country. We are an inventive country. We have been since the Industrial Revolution started in Birmingham back in 1761. But that is going to be as of nothing compared to what is about to unfold in this country. And we are at the front of the grid in the race for the 21st century. But we need to mobilise capital on a completely new scale. And that is why certainty for business was so important. So I welcome the fact that the headroom has been put up to £22 billion a day. I welcome the Chancellor is ending this biannual circus of fiscal speculation by having one forecast a year. I have to say to the House that I seriously think that Mr Hughes needs to consider his position. The fact that we have had a leak of the OBR forecast before this House got to debate the budget, I think is appalling, and it has bedeviled us, this uncertainty. Now, alongside that, we have got to step up the mobilisation of capital on a completely different scale. I will in a moment. That's why I absolutely welcome the package that the Chancellor has set out today to mobilise investment capital in a completely radically new way. The expanding of EMI, the boosting of VCTs, the UK listing relief, that is almost £3 billion worth of extra incentives that our entrepreneurs in this country. That is a game changer, not just for startups, but for scale-ups who are trying to make sure that we end this craziness of brilliant people in this country, brilliant inventors in this country, starting new businesses, growing it nicely, and then getting snapped up and shifted out to the United States. We have to make sure that we are growing and fostering more big global dominating companies here in this country. So I welcome the way the Chancellor lent in behind those firms today. But the third thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we've got to do is to improve the return on investment of investments made in this country. So that means a couple of things. It means bringing down energy costs radically. We didn't have a business energy cost scheme scored in the budget today, but that is because I know the government is now out to consultation. Every single member of our committee would implore the government to do whatever it takes to make sure business energy costs in our country are internationally competitive. It is wrong that firms like Nissan say to us that their energy costs up in Sunderland are the most expensive energy costs of any Nissan plant in the world. We have got to bring business energy costs down. But the message alongside that we hear from small business in particular is that we have also got to bring down business rates. So looking at the policy decisions in the scorecard, that looks like about a £4.2 billion subsidy to help bring business rates down. That should mean that we have the lowest business rates that we have seen in this country. That is a very good thing. But where I would urge the Chancellor to go further is in making sure that we actually cut the costs of red tape in a really bold and radical way. As we travelled around the country, Madam Deputy Speaker, business after business told us not just that they want less red tape, they want better regulation. And crucially, they want departments to coordinate with each other and regulators to coordinate with each other. So we don't have one department over here making one decision and another department over here making another. And so ensuring that we have a Whitehall machine that actually moves at the speed of business in this new age of AI is going to be more and more important as a competitive advantage. So look, I think this is one of the best places in the world to be an inventor. I think it is one of the best places in the world to build a startup business. We now need to make sure that we are one of the best places in the world to scale up a business. Yeah. And that will be the nature of the decisions that we will be putting to ministers over the course of the weeks to come from our committee. Let me just finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this point. The thing that shone through from the statement from the Chancellor today was one thing above all, and it was ambition. Ambition for the future of this country, a confidence in the future of this country. That is why one of the most important numbers that we will read in the OBR forecast today is the fact that business investment is not flat, it's not falling, it's soaring. It is set to soar by £6 billion over the course of the forecast period. That ambition for this country is a sharp contrast to the amnesia of the party opposite, and that is because we on this side of the House know how futures are really built.
Speaking limits are now 8 minutes, and I call Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham, Hodge Hill and Solihull for a fascinating lecture on amnesia, dripping with irony, given the last role he had in government. I wish to congratulate the Chancellor on delivering what is almost certainly her final budget. There is no conceivable way that she can remain in post either politically and certainly not economically for a further year. Businesses, workers, bill payers, farmers, hospices, industry and the public sector cannot endure another cycle of this Chancellor. It's just over a year since she stood at that dispatch box delivering her first budget and boasted that she had made the right choices. Well, if only anyone outside the real economy believed that, we would be in the situation right now. She promised to restore stability to the public finances, and she promised to drive down growth right across the country. She told us that growth would be her central budget mission, but last month the IMF forecast that UK will have the lowest per capita growth in the G7 next year at just 0.5% compared to an average of 1.4% for advanced economies. Labour promised to turn the page on high food prices, but households see food inflation running out of control and hitting 4.9% last month. The Chancellor promised more jobs to tackle poverty, but this month unemployment hit 5%, the highest level since the pandemic, while poverty is now at record levels. Government borrowing stands at a 5-year high, £17.4 billion in October alone, with Labour spending double the defence budget every year just servicing the UK's chronic national debt. And the OECD have downgraded the UK's economic prospects, singling out the Chancellor's policies as exposing the economy to significant downside risk. This gloomy prognosis isn't born just from the SNP's analysis as well, however. Just listen to the Chancellor. She spent the last 18 months insisting that the economy is in a terrible state, while blaming everyone and everything except herself and misunderstanding what negativity her musings signal to investor confidence. It's as though she forgets she is the Chancellor, as yet another stream of consciousness resonates invariably negatively around the economy. She's blamed the black hole. Yes, the one the SNP told Labour about before the election, and which she pretended to only discover upon entering number 10. She blamed the markets for their focus on her fiscal rules. Couldn't make that up. And she's blamed Brexit despite herself voting to trigger Article 50. But it's not just about the fundamental economic incompetence of the Chancellor. It's not even just about Labour's inheritance, which, whilst bad, wasn't the cause of this malaise. This crisis remains a product of the Chancellor's catastrophic decision, and she will own it. Just as she will own Labour's compound fiscal bonfire, she is in the frame for one of the most chaotic preludes to any budget in living memory. Andy Haldane, former chief economist of the Bank of England, called this a circus of speculation around the budget, with endless leaks, U-turns and media trails that created panic in the economy, and which Mr Haldane also added has without doubt, a shadow of a doubt, contributed to weaker than expected economic growth within the UK. There was nothing meaningful in here on energy. The measures on energy bills are a start, but they don't fulfil Labour's election promise to reduce bills by £300, and bills are set to rise in January and again in April. £150 of energy bills, Madam Deputy Speaker, will still leave the Labour Party in debt of £87 per year on their commitment at the election. And Labour's, give way in a second, the SNP did Labour's job for them with a budget proposal that involved a surcharge on banks that would have created that £300 discount for bill payers, just like Labour promised. I'm very happy to give way to the honourable member if you can tell me when Labour's going to come good on the promise.
Thank you. I do thank you for giving way. But of course, if it takes time to read our manifesto, which we were elected on in Scotland, that promise was to be met at the end of this Parliament. So we're actually ahead of schedule. And I'm sure he welcomes that, just like he welcomes the extra 500 million cash terms, extra 500 million in cash, extra 300 million in capital going to Scotland, and a commitment to above inflation budget rises up to 2029. Fantastic, Madam Deputy Speaker, isn't it?
Wow, thank you.
I'm sure the public will be delighted to hear Labour's never, never promise on energy bills, that unlike him, I don't exist on my knees waiting to get patted on the head by Labour ministers on the front bench. I'm off my knees, and the consequentials that we get, the consequentials we get in Scotland are a consequence not of largesse by the Labour Party, but of the taxes that Scottish enterprise creates within this so-called United Kingdom. Nothing here, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the energy profits levy, which is putting North Sea oil and gas into an early grave. As things stand, 42% of firms in the North Sea oil and gas sector forecast revenues for 2026 expected to come out from outside the UK's continental shelf. An analysis earlier this month from the Fraser of Islander Institute showed that the industry is undergoing an accelerated decline. In my view, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a direct result of this Labour government who don't understand energy or the economy. This is Scotland's reality within the so-called union. Our future and our natural endowments decided upon by Westminster ministers rather than the people of Scotland. I must really stick in the craw, especially of Scottish MPs, when they come down here to toe the party line and see the difference that Scotland has had under the SNP since 2007. SNP GDP in Scotland per person has grown by 10.2% compared to 6.8 in the UK. Productivity has grown in Scotland at a rate of 0.9% per year compared to 0.3% per year in the UK. And Scotland attracted 135 foreign direct investment projects in 2024, maintaining our position as the top performing part of the UK. In that regard, they're not so keen on the facts. And Scottish Labour MPs jump up and down about the new minimum wage, despite the fact that their constituents and mine are already on more than that as a result of the Scottish living wage at £13.45. And there was little today to suggest that Labour grasps the severity of the cost of living crisis, which for many people feels endless. Inflation has almost doubled under Labour, and food prices are up a staggering 37% over the last 5 years. People are rightly asking, what is going to sort this? Well, I can assure them it's not Labour. And on the two-child cap, I'm very pleased to see that it's gone and taken with it the appalling rate clause. It's just a shame that all the Labour MPs that were cheering the Chancellor when she announced that today didn't vote with the SNP in September 2024 when we tried to get that removed in our motion. Rank hypocrisy. Businesses in the last year are now in the position of surviving, trying to survive this Labour government rather than trying to thrive and invest. Businesses know that this Chancellor doesn't understand business. Family-owned businesses feel this most acutely, and farm businesses know that the Labour Party is out to get them. Today's announcements will not repair the damage to the reality that exists for many businesses, and it's already too late for some. Whisky duty going up again, Madam Deputy Speaker. The SWA said hiking duty today for the third time in 2 years limits Scotch whisky's ability to generate growth and will have a direct consequence for investment and for jobs. This Chancellor has run out of road with businesses across these aisles. Last year, after 40 billion of tax rises, most of that on jobs, she promised that she's not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. This government has taken the hard decisions as a result, and we won't have to do a budget like this again. 12 months later, here we are again. Another round of tax rises, and let me make a prediction. 12 months from now, we'll be back here once more, albeit with a different Chancellor. Today's budget supports the view taxes are up, borrowing's up, cost of living is up, cost of energy is up, and spending is up, but growth is down. The central, let me remind the House, aim of the Chancellor. Scotland deserves better than this Westminster version of Groundhog Day. Unfortunately, the people of Scotland will be in a position to choose that in May's elections. Thank you.
Catherine McKinnell. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would normally extend the courtesy of saying it's an honour to follow the honourable gentleman, but I have to say that speech was all a bit dreek. And I've reflected hard on this budget, as it's the first since I left my role in the government as Minister for School Standards, and as the first Labour Minister for 14 years, focusing relentlessly on more teachers in classrooms, more support for struggling schools, pay rises that teachers deserve, an inclusive school system, and curriculum reform to transform the life chances of every child. And believe me, I would have given anything to have found a few million, or indeed a few billion, behind the government sofa if there were the chance to making some of those decisions. And I suspect the Chancellor knows exactly how that feels over the last few weeks. But that is one of the reasons why I've now joined the Public Accounts Committee, scrutinising public spending, drawing on those experiences of making those tough decisions in government about how we spend the public's money. And I've really enjoyed the deep dives we've done, examining how public services are delivered, where schemes fail, making sure lessons are learned, and making sure we spend every pound the best way possible. And just last week, we looked at clerical negligence, an area with a staggering £60 billion of public accumulated liabilities. And we have a golden opportunity to cut those costs and deliver better care at the same time. So I would encourage the Chancellor to read our report when it lands, because it might come in handy for next year's budget. And in the meantime, I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments on the... Oh, I will give way.
I thanked my honourable friend for taking the intervention. I wonder whether she would agree with me that the cost of clinical negligence claims in maternity services is now greater than the cost of maternity services. Wow.
I absolutely share those concerns, and I know the Right Honourable Member for Godalming and Ash is also very keen. So I think we have cross-party interest across the House in making better use of these resources. I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments in relation to the infected blood contamination scheme, which is proudly delivered from my constituency in Newcastle North. And I know the team there are incredibly proud of the work that they are doing, and they will be proud of the announcement the Chancellor made today. But Madam Deputy Speaker, working people in Newcastle are really feeling worn down by the cost of living. We know everybody is feeling the squeeze. It's relentless and it's grinding. And I know the Chancellor knows that too and has sought to deliver in this budget on that promise of a better life for a hard day's work. And I see there are many measures in this budget that will deliver on that. The freeze in rail fares, the extending of the bus fare cap, the measures on fuel duty, frozen prescription charges and household energy bills cut. And I also know that the Chancellor cares deeply about children trapped in poverty and too often in families that are working hard and doing their best. And I saw those stories firsthand on the government's Child Poverty Task Force. The driving force behind the crisis is the 2-child limit. In the North East alone, we see tens of thousands of children living in poverty that will be lifted out of that by the announcement today. It is both economically foolish and morally wrong. It's why charities and businesses in the North East have been calling for it to be scrapped, because poverty comes at a price. It comes at a price in NHS bills, in educational failure and in wasted potential. So I strongly welcome the Chancellor's decision to scrap the limit today. I'm afraid I can't give way because the time will keep running. But this is just a start, and it has to be in the context of wider welfare reforms that make sure that every child grows up in a home where work pays and where families can thrive. And that mention of home brings me to council tax. In Newcastle, it's felt as a deep-rooted inequality, because I looked up just yesterday 2 properties for sale. A lovely 5-bedroom house in Newcastle Great Park, £420,000 for 1,600 square foot, and a Grade 2 listed former church in Knightsbridge, 7 bedrooms, 12,000 square foot, and a swimming pool, and selling for £35 million. And if I ask my constituents who should pay more council tax, it's pretty obvious what the answer would be. Yet incredibly, my constituents will pay £75 more in council tax than that household in Knightsbridge. So I do welcome the announcement the Chancellor made today, but I would also urge the Exchequer Secretary to go further and review council tax bands, and especially how new properties in all the new estates we have growing around the country are assessed. And I also want to turn briefly to the new powers for mayors on overnight stay levies. Of course, people flock to the North East for very good reason: history, culture, stunning coastlines, and the friendliest people you will ever meet. And it's only fair that tourists help fund that infrastructure that they use and enjoy when they stay. So I understand why mayors welcome this power and want to decide that at a local level. So it's not just set in London, but in every region, according to what works. But that levy has to be proportionate and not unfairly hit knock-on small businesses, because if they go under, we lose jobs, we lose vibrancy, we lose what makes the North East special. The hospitality sector is under incredible pressure, and I know they are busting a gut to turn a profit, and every cost could be the one that breaks them. So while I really welcome the higher wages in this budget, we do have to also listen to some of the concerns raised by the Resolution Foundation, that we don't want to discourage businesses from hiring, and especially not those young people that want to get that first job on the ladder. And finally, on electric vehicles, I do appreciate the changes that have been announced on pay per mile, but the affordability of electric vehicles remains a barrier to some who do want to buy one and they do want to do the right thing. And many workers do have access to salary sacrifice schemes to help make that switch. However, teachers in academy schools are still unable to access the scheme, and because it was put on pause by the Treasury. So I wanted to take this opportunity to make a plea whether the Treasury can sort this impasse out once and for all, because it really is a win-win for teachers and for the electric car scheme itself. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the goal is clear: a country where hard work pays, where the cost of living is brought back under control, where public services thrive and child poverty is history. Every pound of public money matters, because we know that has the potential to transform lives, and that's what people rightly expect of this government, and I know that is the future that the Chancellor is working to deliver, and why she has announced this budget today.
Councillor Swain.
Deputy Speaker, I congratulate the Honourable Lady, the member for Newcastle on Tyne. She caught my eye earlier. She was cheering the Chancellor with such enthusiasm, even more so than her colleagues who were making a pretty good fist of it. I recall cheering a Chancellor during a budget speech.
Did you get a job?
And then, notwithstanding,
Where's your job, Deputy?
notwithstanding the misgivings that I had, nevertheless, I cheered with gusto. And then somewhat later, I found myself on a train to Oxford to defend the government in the annual union debate of no confidence, and received the news on the train that the Chancellor I had been cheering had been sacked. not a particularly good wicket to go out to bat on. But I'm confident that those honourable members who cheered today will fare no better. Because the economy is still reeling from the last budget that the Chancellor delivered, with her wholesale assault on enterprise, on family undertakings, on initiative, and on every employer in the land. But in fact, business confidence had collapsed significantly before that budget. It had collapsed in the summer when the government warned everyone that things were so bad that they were going to have to get very, very much worse. And as a consequence, we discovered later, when the budget was delivered, that things were even worse than we had imagined. But then the government announced after that budget that they'd stabilised the economy. It was over. They weren't coming back for any more. And they trumpeted throughout the last year the fact that we had the highest growth rate in the G7. Madam Deputy Speaker, that's what they inherited. But as their monstrous regiment has proceeded, the reality is that that growth rate has become more and more anemic. There's no getting away from the fact that last month the economy shrank. And then this summer, they repeated the same mistake. All we got throughout the summer was horror story after horror story of kites being flown, of ghastly taxes that might be imposed upon us. Most unwelcome for businesses planning investment and for anyone planning to take on workers. These interventions move some markets and make others absolutely sclerotic. It's a disaster. And when I challenged the Chief Secretary last week with the example of Hugh Dalton, who properly resigned over a budget leak, I was astounded that the Chief Secretary admitted at the dispatch box that he had no idea what I was talking about. Isn't that extraordinary? And against this background, there's always that chilling presence of the huge increase in trade union power that is part of the bill that is currently before Parliament. But their anti-growth agenda is only half the story. The other half of the problem, I thought, was excellently expounded by the father of the House. The reality is that the government's bloated expenditure plans have overshot by 4%. And we have this enormous growing benefits bill. The disaster was that the government withdrew from its attempts to provide some modest restraint in the growth of that bill. And as my right honourable friend says, we now face a bill running annually at £300 billion, £212 billion of which is for economic activity for people who are under no obligation to work. 4.3 million people, growing at a rate of 130,000 per month. It is completely unsustainable. And it's to be paid for. It's to be paid for by increasing taxes. Taxes that disproportionately attack those people who are already contributing the most. The entrepreneurs, the investors, the very people who can take their investment, their vision, their skills, their employment elsewhere to where the business environment is rather more friendly. And they're doing it in droves, and they're doing it to such an extent that even the business secretary has remarked on it and spotted it. We are facing a situation increasingly where there will be fewer and fewer people able to pay for the bills of this increasing burden of people who are economically inactive. So as I reflect on the fact that as we approach this, I do wish the honourable gentleman would be quiet. He's insufferable. As we approach government activity accounting for 45% of the economy, I always thought that, I know I'm not going to give way, I've reached my peroration. I always thought that the result would be the totalitarian hand clenched in anger. Actually, and you know, and I read, you know, the road to serfdom. Actually, it's turned out very, very different. It's not the totalitarian hand clenched in anger. It's his hand open, dishing out largesse. It's turned out not to be so much the road to serfdom as the road to penury.
Truss was Prime Minister. But I know that people still face pressure on their budgets day to day and week to week. And where there is more to do, where we can provide relief, we are doing it. Extending the bus fare cap, cracking down on rip-off price hikes, freezing prescription charges, and freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, in line with our commitment to the triple lock. At the election, we promised a genuine living wage, and we are delivering it. At the budget last year, I increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage, and I am doing the same this year too. Accepting the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission in full, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. Under current plans, the temporary 5p cuts of fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic will come to an end in April, and fuel duty will be uprated in line with inflation. But I know that the cost of travelling to and from work is still too expensive. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026. And because I know that changes in wholesale prices are not always passed on to motorists, I am bringing in new rules to mandate petrol forecourts to share real-time price rises through a new fuel finder, empowering drivers to find the cheapest fuel, calling out rip-offs and strengthening competition, saving the average household £40 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest drivers of the rising cost of living is the cost of energy prices. The cause of high energy bills must be tackled at source, and so we are investing in energy security, in nuclear and renewable energy, and in insulation through our Warm Homes Plan. But that's not enough when people are struggling with energy bills today. The Conservatives' Eco Scheme was presented as a plan to tackle fuel poverty. It costs households £1.7 billion a year on their bills. And for 97% of families in fuel poverty, the scheme, get this, has cost them more than it's saved. It is a failed scheme, and so I am scrapping it, along with taking other legacy costs off bills. And as a result, I can tell you today that for every family, we are keeping our promise to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living. With £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year. Money off bills and in the pockets of working people. That is my choice. Not to neglect Britain's energy security like the Tories did. Not to leave working families to bear the brunt of high prices like the Tories did. But to get energy costs down now and in the future. That is the Labour choice. And Madam Deputy Speaker, one more thing. Because of our action on bills and on prices, as a direct result of this budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed today that inflation is coming down faster and will be a full 0.4 percentage points lower next year. That's the benefit of a Labour government cutting the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government is changing our country. In the face of challenges on our productivity, I will grow our economy through stability, investment and reform. I've met my fiscal rules and built our economic resilience for the future. I have asked everyone to contribute, yes, for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. But I have kept that contribution as low as possible by reforming our tax system, making it fairer and stronger for the future. I have protected our NHS, maintaining public investment and driving efficiency in government spending. I've taken action on our broken welfare system, rooting out waste and lifting children out of poverty. And I have cut the cost of living, with money off bills and prices frozen, all while keeping every single one of our manifesto commitments. Those are my choices.
Mr. Rankin, Ms. Moulton, your voice carries right across the chamber. Right across the chamber. Try and take a breath every so often. Chancellor.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally? Chancellor, please move formally.
Formally.
The question is that pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Stamp duty reserve tax, UK listing relief, motion number 60. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 65. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, the 2nd of December. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
Formally.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 2026-27, and it is declared that this and is expedient in the public interest that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collections of Taxes Act 1968. I now call the Leader of the Opposition. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on delivering her second budget. I hope she enjoyed it, because it really should be her last. What a total humiliation. A total humiliation.
Can colleagues who are exiting the chamber do so swiftly so we can focus on the Leader of the Opposition? Swiftly exit, quietly. Right. Leader of the Opposition.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. Yeah. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever chancellor.
Order. And the Chief Whip in particular knows that we don't allow clapping in the chamber. Leader of the Opposition.
Today she has announced a new tax rate of £26 billion. They're all cheering. Household income is down. Spending policies in this budget increase borrowing in every year. That smorgasbord of misery we just heard from her can be summed up in one sentence. Labour are hiking taxes to pay for welfare. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. These are the same, yes, they can chanter all they like. These are the same backbenchers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who cheered last year when she taxed jobs and left more than 100,000 people without an income. They cheered because they didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing, and they still don't. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not been an easy time for the Chancellor. No one liked seeing her sitting on those benches as it dawned on her that her own backbenchers were going to do to her political career what she's done to our economy. But she could have chosen today to bring down welfare spending and get more people into work. Instead, she has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes, taxes on anyone doing the right thing. She and this government have lost what little credibility they had left, and no one will ever trust her again. What's amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that she has the nerve to come to this House and claim this is all someone else's fault. A laundry list of excuses. Yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, they blame the Conservatives as if we've been sneaking into the Treasury under the cover of darkness to give pay rises to the unions. She inherited an economy with inflation at 2% and record high employment. She has tanked it in just over a year. Endless excuses. She blames Brexit. She blames Donald Trump. She needs to blame herself. And I've got some news for her. The Chancellor didn't seem to understand what the OBR was saying. Inflation is up, not down, and that inflation was stoked by her tax and spend decisions. The economic fiscal outlook says that they expect inflation to stay higher for longer. Everybody else has read it. She still hasn't read the OBR analysis. She blames higher than expected borrowing costs. Where does she think they came from? Those borrowing costs are driven by her lack of grip. She is paying more, you're saying us, she's paying more to borrow than Greece. She is paying more to borrow than at any point under the 14 years of Conservative government. Perhaps if Labour MPs read a book sometimes, they would know something. That includes an energy crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under us, we had an energy crisis sparked by a war in Ukraine and a global pandemic. What is her excuse? What is her excuse? She is taking the public for fools, but they are under no illusions whose fault this is. The fact is, the bad choices she is making today, choices to break promises, choices to put up taxes, choices to spend more of other people's money are because of the bad choices she made at the last disastrous budget. If you want growth, you need to start with knowing what kind of country you want to be and make a plan to get there. Create certainty for the people and businesses who will drive growth. There is no growth and no plan because Labour focused on settling scores and scratching the itches they had in opposition. She promised stability, she delivered chaos. Just look at the circus around this budget. First the leaks, then more leaks to try to undo the damage. Calling panicky press conferences, U-turning on her U-turns, rolling the pitch one day only to plough through it the next. She had the cheek to talk about stability, Madam Deputy Speaker. She has become the first Chancellor in history to release the whole budget ahead of time. This is extraordinary. It tells you everything you need to know about her grip on the Treasury. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what have we got for all this chaos and disorder? There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. These figures are shocking. Does she really think that anyone will be confused by the sleight of her hand that she had in her speech? Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologize and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT, showing a woman wallowing in self-pity, whining about mansplaining and misogyny. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman...
Order. Colleagues need to simmer down, most definitely, and just breathe a little and allow the legal opposition to be heard. Legal opposition.
All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female. They're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Take her bright idea, the Office for Value for Money. It's been closed down because it didn't save a penny. In fact, it cost the taxpayer £1.6 million. You couldn't make this stuff up. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've identified a way to save taxpayers huge amounts of money by sacking just one person, the woman sitting opposite. The ex-chief economist of the Bank of England was not mansplaining. He wasn't mansplaining when he said the uncertainty around today's budget is the single biggest reason growth has flatlined. What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later. No wonder people are in despair. She says she wants people to respect her.
Order. Conservative colleagues are drowning out the leader of the opposition speech. So just be mindful, nobody will have to hear her at home. Leader of the opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she says she wants people to respect her. Respect is earned. She apparently told Labour MPs this week, I'll show the media, I'll show the Tories, I will not let them beat me. Show us what? Making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetence, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us. She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless. Talk to any business. Talk to someone looking for a job. Unemployment is up every single month since Labour have been in office. They don't want to hear it, but it's true. They're shouting and complaining they cannot create jobs. It is the worst year for graduate recruitment on record. Are they proud of this? Companies like Merck and Ineos slashing investment plan.
Order. If you're on the front bench, I can obviously see you, Mr. Kyle. And there's no need for you to be chuntering this loud. They can see and hear you as well. Leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't want to hear the truth, but I'm speaking for all of those people out there who are sick of this government. Companies like Merck and Ineos are slashing investment plans. The construction sector has shrunk. How is that house building target going, by the way? I'll tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are miles behind and won't even come close to what we achieved. Business confidence is at record lows. No wonder today future growth has been revised down in every year of the scorecard. The papers are reporting that 1 in 8 business leaders is planning to leave Britain. Even one of Labour's biggest ever donors, Lakshmi Mittal, has fled the country.
Fled. With a passport.
What we have in front of us is a budget littered with broken promises. She stood on a manifesto which promised better returns for UK savers. Today, she's putting up taxes on savings, on salary sacrifice even. She promised to give pensioners the security and retirement they deserve. Today, she slapped higher taxes on people saving for their pension. She promised to make Britain the best place in the world to invest and do business. Today, she has raised the dividend tax rates. She and the Prime Minister had already broken their promise to freeze council tax, but today she's decided to go even further, introducing a new property tax clobbering family homes that will only raise small amounts. This is Labour's Britain. This is Labour's Britain. People who work hard, Madam Deputy Speaker, people who work hard and save hard to buy their homes get taxed more, while those who don't work, who in some cases refuse to work, get their accommodation paid for by taxpayers. And then to top it all off, because taxing your home, your car, your savings and your pension wasn't enough, she has, by her own admission, broken her manifesto promise on income tax. Because in the last budget, she said, and I quote, I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax threshold. She said in that budget that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people and take money out of their payslips. But today, she has done exactly that. Why should anyone believe anything she's promised in this budget? And so where is the money going? Small changes to rail fares and prescriptions, these are distractions while she steals your wallet. The real story here, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real story is that Labour have lost control of welfare spending. Not only will working people have their tax thresholds frozen while benefits go up in line with inflation, not only have Labour abandoned reforms that would have saved the taxpayer £5 billion after pressure from these backbenchers, today they have added another £3 billion to the bill by scrapping the two-child benefit cap. We introduced that cap, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it means people on benefits have to make the same decisions about having children as everyone else. Even Labour voters know that it strikes the right balance between supporting people who are struggling and protecting taxpayers who are struggling themselves. Just this summer, the Chancellor admitted that lifting the two-child benefit cap was not affordable. But that was before the Prime Minister accidentally fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. So now he and the Chancellor are buying the votes of their own MPs with taxpayers' money. If she wants to reduce child poverty, she should stop taxing their parents and stop destroying their jobs. She congratulated herself on a new tax on landlords. Let me tell her this. Hiking tax on landlords will only push up rents. It will push landlords out of the market. The people who will suffer are the tenants. And then she talks about taxes on electric vehicles. These changes will hit rural drivers the hardest, but we know that Labour don't care about rural people. All this budget delivers is higher taxes and out-of-control spending. Nobody voted for this. The Chancellor must take responsibility. She chose to impose the jobs tax, driving unemployment higher month after month. She chose to abandon welfare reform, meaning the benefits bill is spiralling. She chose to spend more and more money she didn't have, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill. She is out of money, out of ideas, out of her depth, and she has run out of road. The country simply cannot afford a Chancellor who can't keep her own promises. Her position is untenable, and she knows it. She's talking to the Chancellor. Is he mansplaining to you, by the way? Is he mansplaining? Do you want some help? Would you like some help? What the Prime Minister should do is grow a backbone and sack her. But he won't, because he knows if she goes down, he goes down with her. So we're stuck with them both, Laurel and foolhardy. Does she have any sympathy for the people facing Christmas without a salary because of her jobs tax? For the retailers who are suffering sleepless nights because of their plummeting Christmas sales? People out there are crying. Last year, we had the horrors of the Halloween budget. This year is the nightmare before Christmas. And as for her, she's the unwelcome Christmas guest. 10 minutes through the door, and she's eaten all the Quality Street, Madam Deputy Speaker. But let me tell the Chancellor something she has forgotten. Behind every line in today's Red Book is a family, a home, a lifetime of work and sacrifice. People are frightened, and they have every reason to be. The Chancellor has spent the last year terrifying them. Every decision that she and the Prime Minister make puts more pressure on the people who keep this country going. If Labour are the party of working people, why is it that every day under them, thousands more people are signing off work and onto benefits? It's Conservatives who are the party of work. The Labour Party should be renamed the Welfare Party. And they are making a mistake. The British public don't want higher welfare spending. They want people in work providing for themselves. They want to live in a country where hard work pays, where what you put in reflects what you get out. And we agree with them. There is an alternative. We Conservatives have set it out. This budget could have saved £47 billion, including £23 billion from welfare. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit and using the rest to cut taxes. Oh, they're all pretending they're not listening. It's the shame of the mess they've made. It's the shame of the mess they've made.
Order. Mr. Vince. Mr. Thompson, you're so enthusiastic. I was worried you're going to knock Mr. War off his chair a moment ago. So we need to calm down and breathe, and we need to ensure that we can hear the Leader of the Opposition. Kenny Badenoch.
Even the dog is laughing at the Chancellor, Madam Deputy Speaker. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit, using the rest to cut taxes. She could have abolished stamp duty on homes to get the housing market moving, abolished business rates on shops to breathe life into our high streets. She could have introduced our cheap power plan. It saves a lot more money than what she announced, would bring down energy costs for homes and businesses. That's what she should have done. She should be on the side of people who get up and go to work, people who take a risk to start a company, people working all hours to keep their business afloat. She should be on the side of the farmer, trying to hand something over to the next generation, the investor deciding whether to spend their money in the UK or elsewhere. She should be on the side of the young person looking for their first job, the saver doing the right thing and putting money away for a rainy day, the pensioner trying to enjoy a decent retirement. This country works when you make the country work for them. Only the Conservatives are on their side, Madam Deputy Speaker, and our plan for them is simple. Bring down energy costs, cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Colleagues are exiting. Can they do so quietly and quickly before we come to our first backbench contribution? Quietly and quickly. Other colleagues who are trying to catch my eye should return to their seats. I have noticed them bobbing. And we come to the chair of the Select Committee. We come to Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems like some ways a very long time since 2022. Remember that, where we had a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who put this country in hock to the bond markets, made mortgages rise and put the British public through living hell. What a contrast with my right honourable friend today, who has put money into the NHS, is backing investment in our country, supporting start-ups and supporting the British public in a difficult cost of living crisis caused by the party opposite. And while I want to go into what the Chancellor said today, I cannot let go without making some comments about the Right Honourable Member for Essex, the Leader of the Opposition. Who was shambolic, Madam Deputy Speaker? Them. Under them, mortgages went up. And we saw children entering in poverty in greater numbers. So who is the party that created child poverty? Them, not us. And who is the party that has consistently talked down this country since the election, being negative on every stage and downgrading people's confidence in our country? Who is the party of 0 hours contracts? The party opposite. And who is the party that failed consistently to invest in our schools? The party opposite. And the NHS, and our prisons, and our justice system. Under them, this country spiralled. And I spent a decade under the last government looking at public spending in the privileged role of chair of the Public Accounts Committee. I saw those mistakes close up. I saw the big nasties left, whichever government was elected in July last year. And I commend my right honourable friend for tackling those challenges. And the productivity that we've seen challenges on as a result of the OBR's decisions has been low since 2020. And who was in government since 2010? The party opposite. So they left the legacy, they left the big nasties, and it's now this government's job to clear it up. But amid all the noise, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must remember that the markets are listening, and we need to all be responsible. Government, opposition, every member of this House. And while speculation always swirls around a budget, and that is inevitable because we're all lobbying on behalf of our constituents, our local businesses and every other group that we represent, quite rightly, to persuade our government to do the things that we want to see. And we're all impatient to see those things happen yesterday. That's why we got elected, to make change. But the leaks that have happened around this budget have been very unfortunate. And I do hope my right honourable friend will grapple with this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the most recent leak of the OBR data, moments before her budget, is undermining for us all. So we will be raising that with the Office for Budget Responsibility when they appear in front of the Select Committee next week. But the Treasury Select Committee looked at a number of the issues that were being speculated around the budget: child poverty, gambling tax, cash ISAs, and others. And I'm grateful that my right honourable friend has tackled some of these. I wanted to touch first on cash ISAs. We, in a report, recommended that the Chancellor didn't reduce the limit on cash ISAs from £20,000, and she's reduced it not from the 10 that was being mooted, but to 12. The concern is that for short-term savers, there can be a real issue there, and with targeted support coming next year and work on the advice guidance boundary, there is an opportunity to bring the British public into a more investing environment and to make them invest or encourage them to invest more. But after so many years, when we've all been warned that your capital is at risk, like on the cigarette packets that you might die if you smoke, it takes a long time to turn that culture around. Yes. I do want to pay tribute to the financial inclusion and literacy campaign that the Financial Times backs, which is running a programme in Shoreditch Park City Academy in my constituency over 3 years, with years 7, 8 and 9, to encourage them to teach them about financial literacy. Yeah. They will be the investors of the future, but it will take some time for those young people to get to the point where they invest. So I am pleased that the Chancellor did exempt over 65s from this limit, because that short-term saving is important, and particularly for that age group that is planning for retirement or indeed in retirement. Yeah. I really welcome her support for start-ups. In my constituency, this is a huge issue, and widening enterprise support, something that I know my sister committee, the Business and Trade Committee, will no doubt be looking at. And encouraging companies to list in London, absolutely right. The 3-year stamp duty relief will hopefully be enough to encourage that. We've seen too many companies listing elsewhere, and we need them here in the UK to grow our economy and create those jobs. There's a lot of technical issues around reviews of business tax, which I'm sure we will be looking over. We're putting our slide rule across all of the measures in the budget today. I note that the Chancellor is talking about 4.9 million of efficiencies by government departments by 2031. That is going to be a potential challenge, and so I think the Public Accounts Committee, another sister committee, will no doubt be looking at that alongside the Treasury Select Committee. But I'm really pleased that she's pursuing, giving HMRC more powers to pursue promoters of tax avoidance schemes. We know what the problems have been there, and the Treasury Select Committee has the privilege and responsibility of challenging His Majesty's Revenue and Customs regularly, and they will be in front of us in January, and we'll be able to ask them more about that then. But for me, one of the central planks for me as a constituency MP of why we needed a Labour government, because of what the other party did to children living in poverty. There are 4.5 million children in poverty in this country. That's gone up by almost 1 million since 2012. 2 million of them are in deep poverty, and that's 1 in 3 children living below the poverty line in 2025 in the United Kingdom. Children are sharing beds with their siblings or parents turning up to school tired. And every weekend, I visit people in my constituency and I see this challenge. Just last weekend, a woman showed me the bedroom she shares with her now disabled husband because he had a stroke 3 years ago. And she has a curtain between their double bed and a narrow space so her daughter can share their room. While in their case, luckily, they have a second bedroom where her 2 sons sleep in a bunk bed. That is the reality for so many children, and the poverty impacts their learning and their ability to perform in the world. And it is a shameful stain on this country that when this government entered power, the UK ranks 37th out of 39 advanced economies on child poverty. I will certainly be one.
Really grateful to it. I agree with everything she just said about child poverty and welcome the lifting of the cap. But is there a little bit of a blind spot for this government on rural poverty? Government figures themselves show by the end of next year, the average hill farmer will earn barely just above half the national minimum wage. Is she as disappointed as I am that the government has not tackled this in the budget and indeed got rid of the family farm tax, which is going to tax many of them out of existence altogether.
The honourable gentleman is a veritable champion for his constituency and for rural issues. I think there are very big, important changes here in the minimum wage and the living wage, which will have an impact, and there's lots that could be welcomed for rural areas too. But I recognise that his constituency and mine sometimes have very different challenges, and I welcome the fact that he does champion that here. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to look through the Red Book and the Blue Book at this point, but we will bear that in mind on the committee. But 70% of children in poverty are in working families, so the idea that the chutzpah of the Leader of the Opposition to stand up and say this is a lifestyle choice for people really makes my blood boil. 60% of households hit by the limit are in work, and 15% of affected families are mothers with babies too young for work. And then, and my right honourable friend said it better than any of us could, the Victorian rape clause, the humiliation that women face, that affects notionally 3,600 women, but we heard evidence in the Treasury Select Committee of women who will not put themselves or their children through that humiliation. And any policy that required a workaround like that is outdated and long needed to be gone. And I commend my right honourable friend. And there's been further investment in young people. Certainly.
I thank her for a forensic analysis of our budget, but will she take an intervention from the Leader of the Opposition so she can apologise for this awful policy and its impact?
Well, it is interesting that they're doubling down, the opposition is doubling down on this policy, which is humiliating people. And let's be clear, the birth rate in this country has fallen year on year for the last 3 years. It is well below where it needs to be. I think only in Luton is it actually at 2.1%, which is about where it needs to be. Well, actually, it's a bit lower than where it needs to be. This is a real crisis for this country in the long term. So it's absolutely right that my right honourable friend is investing in the future of Britain. These young people may be poor. In my constituency, they're poor, but they are not, no poverty of ambition there. Children I met when I was elected 20 years ago are now doctors, are barristers, are enterprising business people. In spite of the challenges they face, just think about the ones who didn't get there because they didn't overcome the challenges of deep-seated poverty. So we should invest in our young people, and that is what this government is doing, including with the apprenticeships and the youth guarantee and the 9 youth hubs in London, and one of which is in my constituency. And I really welcome that my right honourable friend listened to the Treasury Select Committee on the gambling taxation regime. We're a cross-party committee, but we had a unanimous report saying that there was a real issue about the lower tax on online gaming, and because of the relative harm that caused compared to going to the races or popping along to your local betting shop. So I very much welcome my right honourable friend's decision to do that, which is contributing to that the payment to take out those children out of poverty. I do on the lifetime, the ISA changes. I just wonder, I caution to my right honourable friend that I hope that the Treasury is watching very closely the impact on mortgage lending by building societies, because in the evidence we heard that was a concern. And if we want to get people into their own homes with the building that's going to be going on, we need to make sure that those mortgages are available to them. So I hope that the Treasury is in ongoing dialogue on that issue, despite this change having been made. But we now need to recognise some of the challenges as well about green taxes. And I haven't had a chance to go through the Red Book in the time since the Chancellor sat down. But I very much welcome my right honourable friend's bold and necessary decision to take on the challenge of the reduction in fuel duty as people move to electric vehicles. This has been a point of debate for at least the last decade or so. Certainly on the time I was on the Public Accounts Committee, we kept challenging the Treasury about how they're going to fill that gap. And my right honourable friend has been bold and right to challenge that. It's a difficult one to grapple with, but she's great that she's done that. And I think we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And in terms of supporting people because of the cost of living, the freeze on rail fares, keeping the bus fare cap, these are things that help people get to work. And the ongoing freeze on fuel duty will help with that too. And the increase in the minimum wage and the living wage are vital. In my constituency, some people work 4 jobs over 7 days just to make ends meet. If they're lucky to have a council tenancy, even on those salaries, it's hard to make ends meet. If you try to go into the private sector, completely unaffordable if you're on that kind of income. And yet contrast that with people who earn enough to work 4 days a week because they can afford to do so. I'm not criticising them for that life choice, but that is the challenge and the difference that's faced. So the challenge on, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, about a high value property tax. In my constituency, on a rough calculation, around 1% of properties are worth over 2 million in central London. So when the opposition scream foul on this, I think in zone 1 and 2 in central London, right on the edge of the city, 10 minutes from Liverpool Street, around 1% of people will face that surcharge. That is a small price to pay when next door our families are living in the deepest poverty that I have described. And it's great to see some movement on energy bills, which is having a really, really big impact. But there's a lot more detail in this budget, which the Treasury Select Committee will be looking at over the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to welcoming the Chancellor to the committee on the 10th of December, where we will both ask her to explain, but we will also challenge her, as is our proper constitutional responsibility, about the detail of her budget.
I call the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're looking forward to the Treasury Select Committee challenging the government on the details. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected on a promise of tackling the cost of living and growing the economy, and this is the second budget where it's failed to do either. For millions of people struggling with higher bills, all this budget really offers is higher taxes. The OBR sets it out in black and white. Disposable income, living standards are down thanks to this budget. Surely the Chancellor should have learned from her first failed budget that you can't tax your way to growth. Absolutely. Under the Conservatives, the UK's tax burden reached its highest level since 1948, and it hit the economy. Yet under this budget, the tax burden will hit an all-time high. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an alternative to all these Conservative and Labour taxes, and the shocking reality is the government knows it. And that's a new trade deal with Europe. A major new deal to cut the cost of living and grow our economy. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has cost the Treasury £90 billion a year in lower tax revenue. Imagine if the Chancellor had adopted our plan to reverse those Brexit costs. Imagine how much more we could be helping families and pensioners across our country with the cost of living. Imagine how we could be ending the cost of living crisis today.
Order. I made it very clear earlier on, and you are a senior member of the House. No intervention should be made, nor will be taken. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm happy to talk to him in the tea room afterwards. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government know the damage the Conservative reform Brexit deal has done to every family and every business across our country. And yet they choose to reject the single biggest policy for ending the cost of living crisis, turbocharging economic growth and boosting tax revenues without raising tax. A new trade deal with Europe, properly fixing our broken relationship with Europe with a new customs union. Growing our economy by freeing British businesses from the costs, barriers and red tape favoured by the Conservatives and Reform. Rather than trying to tax their way out of debt, as Labour is choosing, Liberal Democrats would grow our way out of debt. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be fair to the Chancellor, she has recently spoken about the terrible damage that the Conservatives' Brexit deal has done to our economy. The deal that promised to save us £350 million a week, but ended up costing the taxpayer £1.7 billion every week. But where is the Chancellor's urgency and ambition to fix the problem she